So today we wanted to discuss this situation that recently came to our attention in reference to Kevin Hart, the comedian, the black comedian who was scheduled to do a performance in Cairo, and this was scheduled to happen February 21st of this year. Of course, now it's February 26th today as we're doing this program. And originally, Kevin Hart announced that he would be doing this back in December of last year. So immediately when he announced this, there was a lot of backlash on Twitter that took place from many Arabs currently living in Egypt over Kevin Hart performing in Cairo due to what they called a history of Afrocentric comments. So Kevin Hart was quoted as one stating, "We must teach our children the true history of Black Africans when they were kings in Egypt, not just the era of slavery that is cemented by education in America. Do you remember the time when we were kings?" So this statement sparked the fire behind Egyptians, especially the Egyptian actor Yosef Othman, who was one of the primary figures behind voicing his disagreement with Kevin Hart performing in Egypt. One user was stated to have said that Afrocentrists want to steal and attribute Egypt's civilization to Africans and tell modern Egyptians that we are occupying Egypt from them. We must all participate in the campaign to cancel Kevin's concert. Among those calling for the show to be canceled was Egyptian actor Yosef Othman. He highlighted that Hart had invested in an Afrocentric animation series by the company Black Sands Entertainment, which others have accused of quote unquote blackwashing ancient Egyptian history. So it's interesting that here you have a country that is located in Africa. Egypt is located in Africa, and nobody can deny. So it is an African country, and you have people living in the African country that are wanting to cancel Kevin Hart for being quote unquote too Afrocentric, which really tells me that the people who inhabit this land of Egypt don't consider themselves Africans at all. And it has nothing even to do with the term black, because we have heard them also state that, Egypt was not an African civilization. So this company that Kevin Hart has a partnership with, Kevin Hart's company is called Heartbeat Media Company, and it has a partnership with Black Sands Entertainment, which is a Black-owned comic publishing house. And they do animations, a lot of animations based around ancient Kemet. And then you can go, look at a lot of it on YouTube if you want to see some of those animated short videos. But Kevin Hart invested into the company to further push the growth of this Black company in being able to not only produce, but also distribute a lot of their content. So, this has people up in outrage that not only do Black people have the audacity to state the historical fact that the Africans of ancient Kemet were indeed African, but also to put it in a media format, because we know that in history, throughout history, that media format has always displayed Caucasians or Arabs as Egyptians. Now, when we talk about the Arabs in Egypt, and this is one of the things that should be common sense at this point. We don't even have to go back to the first dynasty. We don't have to go back to Tasseti. We don't have to go back to any of the first 25 dynasties of ancient Kemet. We can start in the modern era, or the common era, as some people would call it. Some people would say AD. But we're in a Roman time now, but we can go back to 639 of the Common Era, when Amir ibn al-Assad, or al-Sami, was the Arab commander who led the Muslim conquest of Egypt. And this is the time period where we first get Arab rule in ancient Egypt. Prior to this time period, there were many other nations who occupied ancient Egypt. Okay, so we can go down the list, but at the time that Amir and his army came in, it was the Byzantine Romans, or the Eastern Roman Empire, that had ruled Egypt for over 6 centuries. Okay, so they weren't even in Egypt when Egyptian civilization not only was at its peak or founded, but even when it was deteriorating and under rule by the Romans. But yet these are the people who are claiming that this is their history, this is their culture. The same people who have a saying in Arabic called Jahiliyyah. And in Arabic, Jahiliyyah means the age of ignorance. So essentially, it's an Islamic concept referring to a period of time before the advent of Islam. So when they look at Haramakit, or what the Greeks call the Sphinx, when they look at the pyramids, when they look at the temples, in their eyes, this was an age of ignorance. And many of them have also attempted to destroy the pyramids and destroy artifacts. Even most recently, there was an Arab who stated that all of the monuments should be blown up. So we can go back to 1196 AD and look at people like Al-Aziz Uthman, who was a sultan of Egypt, who wanted to destroy all of the pyramids. And he started with Menkaura's pyramid. And if you look at Menkaura's pyramid, on one of the sides of the pyramids, you can see where they tried to actually take block by block off of the pyramid, which took them 8 months to do. And it was so hard for them to do that they just gave up because it was costing them too much money to try to destroy the pyramid. So anybody that knows anything about building, you know that it's easier to tear something down than it is to build it up. So for them to not even be able to tear it down, we know they don't have the mental capacity to have been able to build it. But like I stated, we could look at the earlier invasions of Egypt, starting with the first one dealing with the Hyksos. Okay, this is going back to 1650 BCE. That is the first time you have a foreign group of people come in and actually rule in ancient Kemet. You're talking about from the 13th to the 17th dynasties. So that means from the 1st to the 13th dynasty, we have complete African rulership. Once the Hyksos were kicked out or expelled from Kemet by almost the first in the 8th, who opened up the 18th dynasty, from the 18th dynasty all the way until the 25th dynasty, you had complete African rulership. Then you get the Syrians, then you get the Persians, then you get the Greeks, and then you get the Romans. And then finally, you get the Arabs who occupy Egypt until the Ottomans come in under the Mamluks, who were then expelled out of Kemet by the modern day Arab ruler who opened up what we know of as modern Egypt, Muhammad Ali. So that is the history of the Arabs in Egypt. They hold no claim at all. Zahi Hawass can say whatever he wants to say, but he holds no claim at all to the historical culture of ancient Kemet. The only people that are living in Egypt now that can hold claim to that are the Nubians. That's just a fact. People can feel however they want to feel about black people and disrespecting black people, but it's undeniable that Kemet or what's known as Egypt today, was 100% African outside of those various periods where it was invaded by foreign rulers. And even when we go back to the first dynasty, when we talk about Narmer, before he was the first quote unquote king of Egypt, was a king in Nubia. This is where we get what's called the Nakata period or Nakata 3. So they call it Dynasty 0, proto-dynastic Egypt. So you had kings in Nubia older than the first dynasty of ancient Kemet. Narmer was the one who then unified ancient Kemet under his rulership and opened up the first dynastic period. But prior to him, you had at least 6 to 7 kings that have been recorded as being kings in what's called proto-dynastic Egypt. Coming from the south, these were Africans. So when we look at it at its origin, at its core, is an African civilization. And it's ridiculous to even still have to have this debate, even with people who are quote unquote supposed to be Egyptologists or classified as Egyptologists like Zahi Hawass, who is primarily one of the main people that I believe has been financed to continue this distortion of African history and culture. So a part of it is a disrespect for Black people, but also a part of it is the continuous influx of tourist dollars to make Europeans and others and Asians to want to actually travel there. But from what we can see, Kevin Hart pretty much said, oh, well, you know, Egypt is not a major market for him anyway. So he had no problem with the cancellation. And he said he wasn't really going to retract anything that he said because he meant what he said, which he should, because everybody knows that that's a fact. So, you know, I just wanted to lead with that because it's ridiculous to me after all the years of evidence and just when you look at Kemet itself, it's clearly in Africa. Egypt is clearly in Africa. Trying to deny it as an African civilization is nothing more than a hatred for Black people and a hatred for Africa. And really the African Union should be looking at Egypt and questioning why they want to deny the history of an important part of African history as being African.
Part of the erasure of memory, brother. Live in a time period, perhaps it's always been that way, where facts don't matter. You know, when opinion supplants fact, truth is whatever it is you want it to be. You know, just keep this in mind when you utter the words Assalamu alaikum along with a handshake.
You know, the invaders, colonizers, conquerors always, you know, write the history of the places they invade, starting, you know, with their conquest, or, you know, they're starting with their invasions, but they don't classify them as invasions. They have to, you know, in the case of the Arabs in ancient Kemet or Egypt, they have to make it appear as if they were always there, which, you know, we know is absolutely ridiculous. There are no examples of their writing. None of the script there is Arabic. None of the iconography, nothing. So, but what I wanted to ask you was, Egypt is heavily dependent on tourist dollars, and many African Senate scholars have been taking tour groups of people to Egypt, to the Nile Valley for, you know, decades, and the people who run the government that's dependent on these tax dollars don't raise any objections. Now, at the height of the African Senate movement, Zawi Hawass, was definitely, on the attack against, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Asa Hilliard, and all of the others who were pushing forth the idea of the African origin of civilization. But the government, I mean, the whole idea that, like these people talking about, they want to blow up those monuments. The Egyptian government will kill those people.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question about it. Anyone that tries to destroy those monuments, I don't, what Arab nationalists or whatever, they will definitely take them off the planet because they generate so much money. So the question is, no objection to Ashwa Kwesi or Tony Browder or whoever taking people there. But here you have Kevin Hart, an entertainer with obviously some international fame. When he makes a statement, he has to be banned. So in your mind, Brother Amos, does this speak to the potential power that entertainers could have if they had the consciousness?
Definitely. I mean, Kevin Hart, as much as we love all of our scholars, Kevin Hart, of course, has more popularity than all of them from a world perspective. More people are familiar with him. So they would definitely use him as a way to implement something like this. And again, they're not banning him from traveling there. They're just canceling his concert or his performance based around what he's saying. And Kemet has changed, or Egypt has changed over the years. For a long time, Anwar Sadat was a president who is a Nubian himself, and who considered himself to also be to carry the bloodline of the original inhabitants of ancient Kemet. So I'm not sure. After he left office in '81, I'm not sure how that mindset shifted. And then also in the incoming of Zawi Hawass as the director of antiquities, he has always had negative things to say about African-centered scholars since he's in that position.
Yeah, Sadat said he was the first true pharaoh in 2,000 years, referring to his Nubian ancestry.